All right, we are live, or at least we should be live. So hopefully everyone's getting there and getting on board, and we will see people soon. I'm going to teach you a few things today, hopefully. So I'm just going to, of course, we always have a delay in getting from when I start, from when you guys join. So hopefully people can see and hear me okay. And once you get on board, by all means, let me know you can see and hear me just fine, and we will take it from there. So just waiting for people to sign in and get on board. Hopefully, like I said, you can see and hear me just fine. Let me know. And we'll get started with some stuff. So I want to get going on that. So getting some people signing in. I'm going to show you some stuff today about how nutritional scapegoating scams work, and we're going to get into some other things as well. And then, of course, I am going to take your questions. People coming on board, let me know with some emoticons, folks, that you can see and hear me okay. I'm seeing your comments. I appreciate that, Denzel. Yeah, that video seemed to go viral over the course of a day, so was non-intended, but so be it. But we're going to move on this morning to other matters. So I'm just waiting for the audience to build, of course. So we're getting up there already. So just give a couple more people some time to shake out the cobwebs and join us here, and yeah, then I'll get started on today's subject matter, and hopefully be able to teach you guys a few things that you could be aware of in the future. So yeah, so we're just going to wait, get a few more people, and then get going. So look forward to answering your questions as well, but a couple topics I think I can teach you a lot about. So we're just going to hold off a little bit longer and then get into it. So yeah, and then of course I'll go repost this on my YouTube channel later on. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, you can see in the subject line, is nutritional scapegoating scams, and how far back they go, what they are, what they look like, how to recognize them, things like that. I've talked about this in a couple of my books. Some of my books you can see behind me there as well. So a few new followers on there. Appreciate you coming on board, folks. So yeah, if you don't know who I am, we're going to have a lot of new people, I imagine, based on the occurrences of what happened yesterday or the day before. I can't even remember, actually. So getting on with nutritional scapegoating scams. Okay, so hit your share button by all means. There's a lot of people who can benefit from this. I'm going to show you how this has existed for years and years and years, and keeps reinventing itself as a way to scam consumers out of money. Not only that, but scam consumers into victim status, to have you convinced that there's whatever is your ailment, there's something nutritionally wrong with you that, of course, only their fix can solve. And of course, they run with that all the way to the bank. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. I'm going to give you a couple exercises to do as we go along to prove this to you and how it works. So let's start with what is now sort of reached its peak and is now begun to decline. And then I'll tell you what is replacing it in terms of nutritional scapegoating scams, but I'll also tell you what preceded it as well. So let's talk about gluten hysteria. All right, and hysteria is the right word there, because this would be comical if it wasn't so pathetic. The whole gluten thing and the way it takes off is merely representative of diet cult status of bygone eras, where people could slot themselves into a very general symptomology and conveniently label themselves as victims or special cases, only to see real science come out and debunk and discredit all the nonsense that appears as true science. So the whole non-celiac gluten sensitivity issue has now been debunked, but it's going to take time to disappear from the public perception and lexicon in the nutrition world. All right, so this is what we call nutritional scapegoating. As a pop culture and a diet culture historian myself, in terms of research, I've witnessed this happen many times over before. People may forget a similar thing from the past that I researched and studied when a book called The Yeast Connection from William G. Crook came out in 1983, and a very apropos name being Crook. This book made some really silly leaps in scientific conclusions, just like gluten, used a very general symptomology of malaise, like not feeling well or being overweight or whatever, and had a whole bandwagon of people self-diagnosing and self-treating a non-existent, made-up, created, imaginary disease state, okay? Only instead of gluten back then, it was called Candida albicans, okay? So that's Candida albicans. Why am I spelling it out for you? Because I want you to do a little brief thing while I'm talking, and that is type in Candida albicans in your search engine and hit enter. And what you're going to see when you type in Candida albicans and search enter is you're going to see various depictions of what it is, how to treat it, signs that you may have it, all these things. Candida albicans, that came out, like I said, with the book The Yeast Connection in 1983, it's making a comeback, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But you do that brief search, and here's what I want to explain to you. See what pops up. 9 of the top 10 things that pop up, or even more actually. I just did a brief to prove to myself I was going to be able to teach you on this. Hold off on your questions on other matters there, Assad. I'll get to you. And look at what happens when you type in Candida albicans into your search engine, all right? Almost every single site you're going to see is one that is a marketing site. It's going to try to tell you what this is and how you treat it, and they just happen to have the thing to sell you to treat it. And Candida albicans, of course, is now making a comeback, but look at the symptomology as well. A very, very general symptomology, all right? Everything from depression to ADD to, of course, weight gain and bloating and everything. Now, back in the 80s with the book The Yeast Connection, Candida albicans overgrowth was the nutritional cause of all your symptoms. No matter what you were suffering from, Candida albicans was the cause. So only the fact is this wasn't true, even though at the time you couldn't convince the thousands and thousands of its believers of that. And yes, the author of that book created a cult following by stating, and here's a quote from his book and the websites, quote, "The role of Candida albicans has in making millions of people sick in a variety of ways." Now, this is making a comeback, but if you look at and do a search under gluten and then a space and then gluten intolerance and then a space, it's the exact same arguments. Just take out the word Candida albicans and insert gluten, and you'll see tons of websites that say the role of gluten has in making millions of people sick in a variety of ways. If you search, all right, symptoms of gluten intolerance and symptoms of Candida albicans and symptoms of SIBO, you're going to see the exact same symptoms popping up again and again. So isn't that interesting? This is all marketing mumbo jumbo. So now, if you did, I don't know how many of you did that, but if you did do that brief search, take just make some comments or throw some emoticons on the screen so you can see how all this works, that when people want to go out of their way to manipulate search engine optimization, academic researchers don't care about that. They care about presenting what the conclusions of their researchers are. Marketers care all about search engine optimization. And if they can create a nutritional scapegoat, all right, and sell you something to solve it, then they're going to pay money to, when you type in something like gluten, gluten diet, gluten-free, gluten intolerance, you're going to get convinced that you have it, and you're also going to get convinced that these websites that you end up on have a way to solve it. So if you did that little exercise, if you typed in the book The Yeast Connection as well, another interesting thing comes up. Right beside the original book, you'll see Candida albicans diet, the Yeast Connection diet. So you'll see, just like Atkins, just like paleo, just like gluten-free, the original concept spins into other things for profit, like cookbooks, diets, all these other things. But first they have to convince you that you suffer of this thing that they just put in very, very broad terms. So even everything from headaches to ADD to depression and anxiety. It's funny how all three of these modern nutritional scapegoating elements list the exact same symptoms, all right? Now, in the 90s, when Candida albicans was big, I had so many people writing me, and they were insulted when I suggested to them the research shows that there's no research on this that shows it's even real. And you'd be amazed on how many people get offended when you challenge what they seem convinced, what they've been convinced and duped into believing about themselves. But and interestingly enough, what we need to know is 90% of people who identified with Candida albicans overgrowth in the 80s and early 90s, 90% were female. All right, 90% were women. Women are the most susceptible to nutritional scapegoating scams. And this has been going on for decades. And it's not going to be long before some nutritional component becomes culturally demonized and blamed for a host of other ills. This is where SIBO now enters the picture. Small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Sounds just like Candida albicans overgrowth. All right. SIBO, also known as small intestinal blockage obstruction. It's also been called, but it's bacterial overgrowth. So, but back to the rise and fall of the yeast issue of Candida albicans. In 2002, I'm going to get you to do a follow-up search engine thing in a second. In 2002, German researchers, and I'll list the research for you at the end, folks, as I always do. German researchers published a comprehensive review of the accumulated research about Candida and yeast. Over 100 relevant, peer-reviewed academic studies were analyzed. The authors were finally straight to the point regarding the issue, and they stated bluntly, and I quote, "Neither epidemiological nor therapeutic studies provide any evidence for the existence of so-called Candida syndrome." You can type Candida syndrome into your search engine as well. Or, and they quote, Candida hypersensitivity syndrome. That's another marketing buzzword that was used back then, just like gluten intolerance. Hypersensitivity turned into intolerance in terms of marketing terms. Since then, the whole matter of yeast, Candida albicans, and its contribution to ill health has been so debunked and disproven that it now also appears on Quackwatch websites. Now, this is where we pause and we do a search now, type in Candida albicans scam. And unfortunately, the thing that happens here is until you type in the word scam, you never get the actual academic conclusions of pure, unbiased, objective research. What you get is marketing trying to convince you first that you have it, and then, of course, sell you something to solve it. Same thing with SIBO, same thing with gluten. So if you read some of the articles on the Quackwatch site, if you type in Candida albicans scam, what you'll see is one of the doctors actually suggested that Candida albicans, and any doctor who puts his name behind solving it and calling it an actual disease state that you can solve nutritionally, they should lose their license. That's how much of a scam it is and or was. And this is now making a comeback because more and more people want to identify with reasons to be sick rather than reasons to optimize their health. So Candida albicans was once the nutritional scapegoat solution for everything that ails you, just like gluten. Like I said, if you type in the symptoms, you're going to see that they're remarkably similar. It's quite common to use nutritional scapegoating scams to describe all kinds of general symptoms. If you look at SIBO, you look at gluten, you look at Candida albicans from the 80s, see the trend we have here? Once something gets debunked, something else replaces it so that we can establish nutritional scapegoating so that we can sell diets and nutritional supplements to solve it. So a lot of the symptoms for all three of these things, anything from general fatigue, again, very hard to depict in terms of cause and effect, anything from fatigue, depression, anxiety, and everything in between. For every newly invented reason why you suffer that has nothing to do with you, there's always going to be a selection of people who want to willingly follow that logic and be victims to a phantom creation. Gluten was once this generation's nutritional scapegoat. SIBO now seems to be following in its footsteps. So whatever your issue, from constipation to diarrhea to headaches to ADD to infertility to unhappiness to joint pain and depression, going gluten-free is the treatment. And now, of course, SIBO diets are the treatment as well, although all these things are eerily similar to Candida hypersensitivity syndrome from way back in the 80s. So very, very interesting. Now, if you type in to your search engine gluten intolerance, one of the top results that comes on, again, a result of SEO, search engine optimization, you'll see an article that says 12, I forget how it's worded, but 12 points that you could be gluten-free that you never thought of or something like that. And you click on it and it takes you to a marketing site. Doesn't look like a marketing site, looks like a research site. And they present to you these general symptoms, some of which I listed for Candida. I think one of the first ones they list there is anxiety and depression. And then they talk, constipation, they talk ADD. And then, of course, at the top, you can click on their 5-day gluten-free diet to solve it. These are nutritional scapegoating scams, okay? They're built to convince you have an issue and sell you the solution to it. And as you honeymoon on that solution, not only will you buy the products, you'll likely take to social media and hype the products as well, what I call a honeymoon period of the placebo effect. And that's how these marketers work. So, for instance, getting back to gluten, surveys have shown that the majority of people who buy gluten-free can't even tell you why they do, not in real terms. There's now this, the famous late night Jimmy Kimmel, or the other Jimmy, I think, who did a segment on this, and it was hilarious. But with the modern digital age of influence, when something blows up big, it blows up really big, especially online. This is where the nonsense comes in with Candida albicans overgrowth, which was nonsense, which was a phantom creation. There wasn't much to do back then because there was no social media. But when gluten came along, and you could use search engine optimization and hype gluten intolerance, there was then the point of the theater of the absurd. There became gluten-free dating sites. People were putting their dogs on gluten-free diets as well. Apparently their pets were suffering too. The notion spreads that being an informed citizen means you may not know the science of what gluten is, but you just know it's bad for you. That's how nutritional scapegoating works, and it makes a lot of people a hell of a lot of money. So this is gluten sensitivity, Candida albicans, continues to be debunked right to this day. Now, I'll do some more research for you. Peter Gibson of Monash University in Australia, in his research, found that only 8% of self-diagnosed gluten sensitive, only 8% of people even experienced a worsening of symptoms when gluten was added to their diets. When they didn't know gluten was added to their diets, they didn't experience any worsening of symptoms. So while celiac is a very real issue and a very painful one, gluten sensitivity can certainly exist, but the reality of it is that it's extremely, extremely rare, and the likelihood that you have it is just as rare. So very, very important to know. So yet gluten hysteria still continues. Like I said, if you do those, you type in those keywords into your search engine, you're not going to get the research that debunks it, you're going to get the marketing sites that want to convince you of it. This is nutritional scapegoating at its finest. So some parents are even positive that it's gluten that caused their child's ADD or their autism or even schizophrenia. You're seeing that online. Really? But to put all that silliness to rest, researchers at University of Rochester found that a gluten-free diet had no effects on the symptoms of autistic children, none at all. So, of course, this doesn't dissuade parents who believe otherwise. In 2012, Italian researchers implored colleagues to, quote, prevent a gluten preoccupation from evolving into a conviction that gluten is toxic for the general population. That's how bad it was getting 5 or 6 years ago. So they were a little bit late on that, as researchers tend to be. Very, very important. I'll get to your comments in a minute, but because I see the comments are building up. So that means some of you are listening. So in an interview for WebMD, Stefano Guandolini of the University of Chicago Celiac Disease Center, so an expert on gluten if there ever was one, all right, he said, and I quote, someone with celiac who actually needs to be on a gluten-free diet also needs to be closely monitored, and they can benefit, of course, from being on a gluten-free diet with such close monitoring. And then, quote, in big, bold, italic letters, but for everyone else, this diet simply makes no sense. The fact is, for 99+% of the population, gluten is merely a plain old simple nutrient component of a variety of foodstuffs, a component that the body absorbs well and uses for vital functions, unless you have celiac disease. Now, here's the thing. You type in those words that I said before, type in gluten intolerance, type in Candida albicans, type in Candida albicans hypersensitivity, type in SIBO, you're not going to get to the sites where you're going to land on someone who's qualified to comment. Notice this person I just referred to, all right, Stefano Guandolini, is from the University of Chicago Celiac Disease Center, which means all he does is study celiac and the things that cause it and the things that relieve it. All these other sites you're going to get to are marketing websites by people who want to pretend to be experts so they can market at you solutions. So, the old saying that I use here is if you argue strong for your limitations, then they're yours. And what that means is if you're easily convinced you have gluten intolerance, you have Candida albicans overgrowth, you have SIBO, then you're going to just tell yourself that you're sick and you're special case, and there's a reason why you can't do whatever, or you can't lose weight, or you can't solve your leanness issues. It's all crap. But if you want to argue for it, they're yours. So now what's emerging, okay, in the last 3 weeks, the reason I'm addressing this, in the last 3 weeks, several women, of course, have written me who are telling me they've gone to some, and this must be some popular new website because that's how it usually happens. It happens in trends. They're getting reports back that they have all three. They have Candida albicans overgrowth, they have gluten intolerance, and they have SIBO. Now, the chances of having all three of these going on at once is like similar to the chances of getting hit by lightning 4 or 5 times. It's just absolutely insane, okay? But the general public tend not to read published journals or go to websites like WebMD and wade through academic studies and conclusions. So things like gluten hysteria continue, and now SIBO taking its place. Gluten and SIBO become the new nutritional boogeyman, just like Candida albicans was before it. And now SIBO is taking over. So not that SIBO doesn't exist, but the likelihood that it applies to you is less than, say, 2%. And yet everyone's reporting to have it. So how does that work? As I've pointed out many times before, when it comes to gluten, back in the late 50s and 60s, the average North American got up to 30% of their calories from bread. If you're a nutritional historian, a diet history historian, as I am, you'll see that in my books, Beyond Metabolism and Understanding Metabolism. In the 50s and 60s, before the onset of the obesity epidemic, North Americans got 30% of their calories from bread. There was a plate of bread on the table virtually every meal, with the exception of lunch, and lunch is usually when people had sandwiches anyway. So I know that was the case for me growing up in high school and things like that. So we had bread on the table at breakfast. I had sandwiches for lunch. There was always bread and butter on the table for dinner, and yet there was no obesity epidemic until the 70s. So we have here a contradiction. If there was a gluten issue, then back then it would have been an epidemic, since people ate far more bread and far more gluten than they do now. Gluten is simply not the problem. The truth is, and here's the truth, I put it in my notes in big, bold, capital letters here, so listen up. The truth is, rising stress levels are more the trigger to gastrointestinal issues than any other cause than direct food allergies. Rising stress levels are more the trigger to gastrointestinal issues than any other cause other than direct food allergies. So think about that for a minute. Oftentimes, again, the very common denominator and common expression in people who study diet psychology is the problem isn't what you're eating, the problem is what's eating you. So for many times, the women who are already lead studies show more stressful lives than men because they have more demands on their time and they feel more stressed about it, and they are definitely more stressed in terms of appearance demands, etc., etc. Women have increasing stress, and they add to that by stressing about diet and stressing about body image. So under those stresses themselves, worrying about diet actually causes the gastrointestinal issues that they're trying to alleviate. Has nothing to do with gluten, has nothing to do with SIBO, has nothing to do with any other newly created nutritional scapegoat that's going to come down the pike in the next few years in order to make someone a hell of a lot of money. So we just live in this fitness madness era where you're led down this garden path to believe all disease and illness and issues of malaise and issues of not feeling your best are a consequence of incorrect nutritional status that someone else can solve for you. But really, this is just nutritional scapegoating at its heights. And we see this with gluten, and we see it now with SIBO as the emerging new nutritional boogeyman. And we see the history I just gave you, that in the 80s, Candida albicans before it, this demonizing of good and bad nutrition is likely to continue. It sells industry agendas, folks, and that's what it's meant to do. So like I said, if you couldn't do this right now, take this exercise up after I'm done today and go look. First type in gluten and then space, see what the top search engine things show you. Type in gluten intolerance, see what the top search engines show you. You're going to end up on marketing sites. You're going to end up on sites that define these issues for you, so you're already thinking they're legitimate issues because someone else is defining it for you, right? It would be like me defining for you what a cloudy day is, but I don't describe clouds in the sky, but you take my word for it because I have a website that tells you what a cloudy day is, all right? So it's the same nutritional scapegoating scam, all right? But if you type in scam after these words, all right, Candida albicans scam, type in Candida albicans and you'll see the same symptoms as gluten intolerance. You'll see the same symptoms as SIBO. How is that possible? All right, it's got to be one. It can't be all three. So how this works in nutritional scapegoating is that you take general symptoms of malaise, all right? Malaise just meaning not feeling all that great. So you take the very most general symptoms and you try to apply cause and effect to it in a way that you can sell something and market something to solve it. So headaches, depression and anxiety. Oh, I have depression and anxiety. Let me look. Depression and anxiety. Let me look. Oh, well, it could be caused by a gluten intolerance. I never knew that. Oh, and they just so happen to sell you, saliva swabs to test. And what are the odds that the test is going to come back that you test positive for SIBO or gluten intolerance or Candida albicans? Of course you're going to test positive. And then, of course, they got a whole whack of stuff they can sell you. And they'll try to turn your day-to-day diet into rocket science, PhD level nutrition when none of it is necessary. So hopefully that helped you out. I'm going to list the references for you now that you can check out. One is an article, and again, folks, I only list academic references unless they're actually long, like from respected journalist studies. who themselves have done the vetting of academic references. So C.T. Van Dyke, A.L., name of the article is Increasing Incidence of Celiac Disease in North American Population. That's from the American Journal of Gastroenterology, May 2013. A. Sapone, A.L., the name of that article is Divergence of Gut Permeability and Mucosal Immune Gene Expression in Two Gluten-Associated Conditions, Celiac Disease and Gluten Sensitivity. That's from the British Medical Journal, March 2011. And then De Sabatino, A.L., name of that article is Non-Celiac Gluten Sensitivity, Sense or Sensibility, ? And that's from the Annals of Internal Medicine, February 2012. And then S.R. Dube, D-U-B-E-A-L, the name of that article is Cumulative Childhood Stress and Autoimmune Disease in Adults, Psychosomatic Medicine, February 2009. So that's some research that you can follow up with if you want, or my nutritional text back there, Modern Nutrition and Health and Disease. Of course, that one is just a scientific reference with over 3,000 pages. So unless you're an academic, that one might bore you to death, but that's where the issues lie. So let me get to some of your comments, and then I'll get on to the next topic that I wanted to get to. Yeah, you'll be surprised when people fly how many special diets there are now. And it gets people all discombobulated. I have to be gluten-free, I have to be this, I have to be that. So nutritional scapegoating is a very, very real thing, and people need to start identifying less with it and seeing it for the scam that it is, because it's making a lot of people a lot of money, and it's convincing a lot of other people that you're sick and that you're less than you can be because you have some phantom created ailment, and you're going to spend lots and lots of money to solve it. But of course, it's never going to be solved, because if Candida albicans overgrowth, all right, was the answer or the problem, to your ADD, your anxiety, your depression, your bloating, your weight gain, then that diet would have solved it. There would have been no need for gluten to replace it. But then gluten becomes a nutritional scapegoat. And if that actually existed, then SIBO would not be replacing it. So every time something wears out its welcome and the academic community catches up and debunks it, there's going to be a new nutritional scapegoat to replace it, because that's how you make a lot of money in this industry, fitness and diet industry. Of course, fitness and diet industry, of course, want to hide behind expertise when in fact they just like they're idols. They like holding out that they're different than the medical community. They're just more misinformed and uninformed than the medical community. So that's very important. So look for, when you land on these websites, who are these people commenting? Are they from? If someone's commenting on gluten, then they better be someone who works in the celiac end of the medical industry, all right? Not someone who just tells you about it, okay? So same thing with SIBO. Same thing I've told you about when I talk about metabolism and metabolic damage. I look for research that reflects someone who's got experience in internal medicine or endocrinology. I don't go to industry websites or a website that has nobody who identifies with that level of expertise. That's how you get duped. That's how you get convinced. All right. So, and now that this is emerging now, where people are writing me, where they're told and they're convinced they have all three, Candida albicans overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and gluten intolerance. Like I said, that's the likelihood of that is similar to being struck by lightning several times. It's just not possible. So let's get serious about that. So, all right, I'll get to some other dairy-free. That depends on where you stand on that. I have some thoughts on that. That's in my book, Understanding Metabolism. Maybe I'll share that next week, Wendy. Perry just writes that Nancy, he's answering Nancy, I guess. I must have missed. Oh, okay. stress related to digestive issues. Perry's just writing that he is in gastro problems, and he sees it all the time. Shocking how many colonoscopies and EGDs are performed on people who think they have a medical problem but don't. And that's the other thing. So many ladies will write me, and it's mostly ladies, that's why I use the term, there's no bias there, but they'll write me and they'll say, well, I got all the tests and they came back normal. Well, of course they came back normal because you've been convinced of something that doesn't exist. So what you really have to do is change how you adapt to stress. So very, very important. So, and you have to watch where you're getting your tests done. Watch what websites you land on. Alternative medicine is becoming the scam that the medical community is warning about. It's not the medical community with the conspiracy to keep you sick. It's actually alternative medicine industry. So when they're doing swab tests and stuff at their special lab, but they're not doctors and they don't specialize in that area, then of course you're going to come back testing positive because there's a lot of stuff they can sell you. So, you know, and I'm not going to, you know, if you're convinced that you're one of the special cases, even though the chances are like 1 in 1,000 that you would be, and you're convinced of that, I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. You know, you can, again, argue for your limitations and you can have them. So that's the way to look at it there. So yeah, so I mean, there's too many people, as Monica's saying, who are looking to hide behind victim status rather than empowerment status. So you know, you can choose to be a victor or you can choose to be a victim, but you can't choose to be both at the same time. That's one of my old sayings. So Terry wants to know, how can these people get away with that? Well, because there's no, in these industries, Terry, since what happened in the 90s, when the supplement industry went to court, they didn't have to be monitored by the FDA. So not only can they make wild claims, they can also make wild promises that people marketing drugs can't make. So if you see a commercial on TV and you laugh because there's an ad for some kind of drug, and then at the end they list all the potential side effects, that's because they legally are mandated to do so. But the supplement industry, because of the results of the Diet, Health, and Supplement, I forget what it's called, DHSEA Act in the 1990s, they aren't held to that same level of accountability. They can basically claim all kinds of stuff and claim to solve it as well. So they don't have any professional scrutiny. Every so often something will come down the pike that, you know, someone will be taken to task. For instance, GNC has been fined over and over again. About every 5 years, they get fined for their supplements not containing what they say should be in the bottle and for making claims that they can't prove. But no one hears about that. They just pay the fine because it's worth it to them. They just consider that to be like a speeding ticket because in the end, they make tons and tons of money. So, and yeah, I mean, this industry loves its sacred, you know, its sacred idols, and one of them is supplements. So over and over again, studies show that supplements do nothing, and in worst case scenario, actually harm your health. And I'm talking about vitamins and minerals. This industry, every couple of years, those studies come out. I got one in the hopper for maybe a future breakfast with the coach. You know, that shows, and you know, if you're paying attention to the research, these studies come out cyclically about every 3-4 years. The fitness industry just ignores them because they know better. They know you need to take vitamin D. They know you need to take calcium. You know, we know you need fish oils. Well, if you read my book, Understanding Metabolism, then you probably read the chapter, There's Something Fishy About Fish Oils, and you know, what's in there as well. So, so, you know, we can look at all these kind of things, toxins in the diet, all these nutritional scapegoating scams that want to convince you that, you know, nutrition is sort of a zero-sum game of watching very carefully that you don't fall into the wrong hands or you're going to end up very, very sick. But as long as you're eating whole foods and produce, healthy whole food diet, the likelihood of that happening is very, very minor. Recently, some other research came out showing that ladies that made a lot of money online selling, again, healthy whole food diets and the right diet, and I think it fell under the label of clean eating. There was a article written where a few of them now have come forward And yes, they made tons of money, way tons of money, but they've come forward with saying that that approach, their own approach to their own lifestyle, had them become orthorexic. So they become convinced that if they weren't on guard for every morsel they ate, they were going to get very, very sick and die of cancer. And that's no way to live. That's life inside the thin cage, as I call it, which is, absolutely ridiculous in the world we live in. So very, very important stuff to consider. Hopefully you're hitting your share button, or you find this interesting. I'm trying to bring stuff to you that I think you can benefit from. So watch your search engines and what you choose to research and how you choose to type in what you're researching. So if you're ending up on websites like bodybuilding.com, that's not research. All right, so be careful. Now I want to talk to you a little bit also about protein. So I'm just going to switch right into that. And then I'll take your questions, and of course, always look afterwards at the comment section, and maybe there's some things you can relate to, maybe some things that you can comment on as well. So that's always good. But by all means, hit the share button as well, folks. So here's the thing about the protein promise as well. Big, big deal in the fitness industry, especially if you're trying to work on muscle development. But the latest research has really debunked the whole notion of all this special protein needs and more protein to build muscles. Now let's leave aside some of the things I talked about in a recent video. Yes, if you're shooting growth hormone and you're shooting insulin and you're doing all these things in the hardcore end, then you can probably get away with shunting a little more protein into the muscle and create a caricature of a physique. I'm talking about real people in the real world leading real lives. So there's certainly an advantage to eating a bit more protein than the recommended daily intake of protein if you're training with weights regularly and trying to sculpt a body. The current recommended daily intake stands at about 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight, and that always sort of adjusts with the research every 3 or 4 years as well, which also shows you that this isn't hard science. But you don't need much more protein. Studies at McMaster University provided diets to participants at either 1.35 or 2.62 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, and participants were untrained men who were subjected to 1 month of intensive weight training at 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week. So both groups gained muscle size and strength, but those who consumed the larger amounts of protein gained no more than the participants who took in barely half as much protein. So furthermore, the gains that these subjects should be attributed to physiological adaptation to training stimulus and not nutritional status. Let me say that again. The conclusion was the gains that these subjects made should be attributed to physiological adaptation to training stimulus and not nutritional status. So having been previously untrained and then training 90 minutes daily for 6 days a week would certainly have a physiological adaptation response in terms of noticeable muscle hypertrophy, muscle growth, and strength. Furthermore, the research also shows that experienced bodybuilders who, and this applies to those who follow me regularly, are probably a little more experienced than a lot of you, but the research also shows that experienced bodybuilders who have already developed their physiques actually need less protein to maintain that muscle mass. Think about that. You're continually getting marketed to you that bigger muscles need more protein. You got to feed that engine. Well, that engine isn't fed with protein. That engine is fed with protein-sparing nutrients, fats and carbohydrates. So that research found that once a physique is developed, less protein to maintain that muscle mass. This is because over time, listen to this form of resistance training, weight training, strength density training, teaches the body to retain more protein from the diet because of the training stimulus. So taking in less protein, your body's going to use it more efficiently. So what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that there's a lot of nonsense out there about macros and macro manipulation, and you're trying to use numbers, you're trying to quantify what's actually a qualitative inner physiological adaptive response that can't be measured. So as you see someone weight training like myself for years and years, that form of resistance training actually teaches the body, programs the body to retain more protein from the diet. So thinking that I'm going to control that from the outside in by counting macros and I better get it right, or my training's going to be for naught, is absolutely ridiculous. And I've been arguing that forever and ever, but people love their number crunching, especially the wannabe professors and the wannabe coaches out there. They think it makes them look smart, but actually your body is really, really smart. And this research shows that the stimulus of resistance training teaches the body over time to retain more protein from the diet to keep muscles volumized. Where are you hearing that? You're not hearing that if you type in protein needs in your search engine. You're not going to end up on the research that shows this. This is what I'm talking about. So, and then of course people get on social media who have no idea what they're talking about. They're just sort of weekend warriors. They don't immerse themselves with a passion into doing this for a living like I do. So you get a lot of the blind leading the blind. So ironically enough, what the supplement industry wouldn't want you to know is that massive protein intake would actually work against this physiological construction and adaptive response. Excessive protein intake increases protein turnover rates, and this creates a kind of dependency on continually needing excessive protein intake that works against the body's needs, not with the body's needs. So what we see here is that a continual training stimulus that's consistent teaches your body to use less protein better. But if you think you can know better and start inundating your body with protein, all you're really doing is increasing protein rates. A process happens called deamination, which just D means to take away from, and amination, amine means amino. So your body starts stripping the protein of its nitrogen content, which is the thing that makes protein special, and uses it for energy or stores as fat. So you're actually working against yourself by taking in more protein than you actually need. The references for that are from, one of them is Kay Carpenter. The name of that article is Protein and Energy, a Study of Changing Ideas in Nutrition. That's from Cambridge University Press, 1994. It's only Cambridge University, only one of the most respected universities on the planet. But, your personal trainer knows better, I'm sure. The other one is another article you can look at is E.A. Fox. The name of that article is Perceived Protein Needs and Measured Protein Intake in Collegiate Male Athletes, an Observational Study. That's the one I just read to you. Journal of an International Society of Sports Nutrition, June 2011. Another article is P.W. Lemon, and that one is called Protein Requirements and Muscle Mass Strength Changes During Intensive Training in Novice Bodybuilders. That one is from the Journal of Applied Physiology, August 1992. And then J.W. Hartman, A.L., the name of that article, a research article, Resistance Training Reduces Whole Body Protein Turnover and Improves Net Protein Retention in Untrained Young Males. That's what I was just referring to. That's from the Journal of Applied Physiology, Nutrition and Metabolism, and the issue there is October 2006. So I thought I should talk about that, because a lot of people are also making a lot of money hyping protein powders to you as if there's something there that you actually need, when actually the more protein you take, especially in terms of protein powders, can actually get in the way of teaching your body to use protein more and more efficiently to build muscle. So these are things you need to know. These are things some people will refuse to know because, like I said, your personal trainer knows better than actual academics who have only been studying this stuff their whole careers. So very, very important. So let me look at some comments. My opinion on being vegan and weight training. I think being vegan is a little too extreme. My experience, there's going to be some gaps there in health-related issues. There is emerging research on that I can dig up. There's nothing certainly, it's certainly health promoting. That's better than being a meat eater, that's for sure, or being a consistent meat eater. But we are meant to be omnivores as human beings. So you might want to read Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma. Tommy writes, hey, Scott, trying to get into the cycle diet and super compensation mode. Not so lean yet, maybe 11 to 12% body fat, weight around 200 pounds. That's okay, that's neither here nor there. I've been doing maybe a week and a half of dieting and then refeed. Okay. After that, I weigh 6 to 7 pounds more, and that goes away in 5 to 6 days. Is that a good sign? That's a great sign, Tommy. Yep, you're on the right track. You definitely want to continue along that track. Maybe keep your refeeds, your spike days. Maybe keep them, that far apart for now, or maybe even further apart. But it sounds like you're on the right track. And don't forget the Cycle Diet book. There's also the Cycle Diet course, right? http://thecycle.diet. That's the cycle.diet. That's how to use refeeds in order to optimize metabolism and enhance leanness and staying lean. So that's very important stuff. I want to finish today on another topic, sort of just a personal comment. Last week, I posted a pretty cool video of protege Andy having one of his cheat meals in real time. We sped it up and made it even funnier. I don't know how many of you saw it, but it was Andy chowing down on Five Guys burger and family-sized fries and a drink, and then he followed that up with a dozen donuts. And of course, there's the link to the Cycle Diet, folks, right there. Perry just posted it, so you can check a look at that. Anyway, I don't know how many of you saw that. It was it was meant to be a teaching moment for the Cycle Diet. There's Andy with, being a cover model and six-pack abs, ripped year round. And there he is eating a dozen donuts, burger, and fries in one meal. Because he was actually talking and people were doubting that he actually eats 10 to 15,000 calories on his refeed spike days. And of course, like I said in the video, we have no reason to lie. Why would we lie about that? We're making a point. Anyway, the proof was visual, so we recorded Andy having a regular meal. But what bothered me were some of the comments. Here's the thing about social media, folks. In some of the comment flow, people were asking questions that were clearly explained and answered in the Cycle Diet book or the Cycle Diet course. So when I responded and said, well, you obviously don't understand super compensation mode. And then later on, I said to one of my comments was, I guess you haven't read the book. And the comments that came back under that were that I was being a dick. Okay. And one of the other people wrote in and said, if I'm going to have no patience answering people's questions, I should get out of the fitness industry. Folks, not only is that offensive, it's ridiculous. So here's the thing. No one gives more to people, I don't think, than I do in terms of being patient, answering questions, getting up at 3 in the morning so I can be down here on a Sunday at 5 in the morning to try to educate you all. So when people make comments like that, they don't realize how much I've devoted already to this industry. Calling me a dick and telling me to get out of the industry because I don't have patience for your answer. Here's the thing, folks. Not every answer can be done in a Facebook post. That's why I write books. That's why everyone writes books. Some things require delicate, long explanations. And if you're too lazy to go out and read the actual stuff that's being provided for you to answer the questions, I'm not the one being a dick. All right? So to call me that and stuff and to think you're entitled to free answers that no one else feels entitled to, and if I don't provide them in a way that you feel is good enough for you, then I'm a dick, or worse, I should get out of the industry, all right, is just nonsense. So I'm here for the people who want to learn. I'm here for the people that respect the fact that you can't solve every issue and answer every question in a 1-paragraph Facebook post or 142-character tweet. There's enough of that nonsense existing in the industry already. The reason I write books, the reason I do online courses is because some of these answers have a lot of gray area and they need to be addressed in a way that you can't address in a Facebook post. Maybe I should have outlined, hey, that answer is in my Cycle Diet book. Maybe you should read it. I can't be spending all my day worrying about whether I'm writing my comments in a way that won't offend somebody, all right? This is my Facebook page, keep in mind. So calling me a dick and telling me to get out of the fitness industry when I've been in it for 4 decades, and some of the practices that are widely practiced in the fitness industry today are things that I created and invented, that just crosses a line with me. So I thought I would finish on that. So yeah, so I'm getting a lot of new people today, obviously. So like I said, hopefully this has benefited you. The turnout was a little less than I expected today, so by all means hit your share button. That's how you look for nutritional scapegoating scams, folks. That's the reality of protein needs. Remember, protein can be low as long as protein-sparing nutrients are high enough to support that. And the more consistent your resistance training, the more you teach your body to retain the actual protein it needs from the diet you have, and that way you don't risk any kind of kidney issues, etc., from excessive protein intake. So very, very important. So James says he's a first-time listener. His wife Karen is a client. I hear her every day saying, Scott says this at least 2 times a day. Thanks for your help. Appreciate that, James. Yeah, so just getting through, trying to get through to people, and like I said, I've earned my stripes in this industry, folks. I would consider, if this was the military, I would be a 5-star general. I've put in the time, I've put in the work, I've got my hands dirty. So yeah, I mean, I think that should warrant me a certain amount of respect, but at least on my own social media pages, I'm going to demand respect, because I wouldn't disrespect someone on their homepage. So enough of that. Just really wanted to make that point. Calling me a dick doesn't make me want to stay and explain myself any deeper. So yeah, anyway. I've been 4 decades in, I've earned my stripes here, so enough of that. But so anyway, keep in mind about nutritional scapegoating scams. They are going to continue. The longer you're in the industry, don't keep falling for it, folks. I mean, geez, I have people who actually, who still write me, and in the 90s they were convinced that they had Candida albicans overgrowth, and then in the last several years they were convinced they were gluten intolerant, and now they're convinced they have SIBO. People keep falling for the same crap quackery over and over again. Watch when you do a search what you're typing into the search engine box, and then when you land on a page, look at the academic credentials of the people commentating. Sometimes MD beside a name doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of MDs out there who want to make a buck just like everyone else, and if they can use MD or PhD beside their name, they're going to do that. There's unscrupulous people on every side of the academic equation. So keep that in mind. Remember my lecture from several weeks ago when I started the whole low-carb diet politics for profit argument. We saw that Dr. Atkins had basically no background in the things he was talking about and lied consistently about it. I posted all the references to that as well. So this is the same kind of stuff. So always meant to help. So please hit the share button. And if you have any ideas, topics you want me to discuss in the future, by all means do so. Check out some of my books behind me. The Hard Gainer Solution course is almost ready, folks. We'll have that out. Over 120 videos. It's about as in-depth as it gets. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. And then of course you can see all my books there. Understanding Metabolism, Beyond Metabolism, The Cycle Diet, The Aging Proposition, Physique After 50, The Anti-Diet Approach to Weight Loss and Weight Control, Permanent Weight Loss, Your Truth is Calling, and on the bottom of it, The Abel Approach, 2nd edition, 400 pages of my various training methodologies, etc. So that's it for this week, folks. Thanks for being out there. And if you weren't, it wouldn't make much sense for me being in here. So yeah, hit the share button. Let's get more people next time. And I will look forward to speaking to you all next week. Thanks for coming out.